Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. Happy to be with you once again. It's our second episode of this return to game week flow for Penn State after the bye week. We'll be back with a third and fourth episode. Of course, that fourth episode this week will be our post-game podcast coming out of Beaver Stadium on Saturday after the Nittany Lions take on Kent State. The Golden Flashes are 0-3. They're 1-14 since last season. They're coming off a 71-point loss to Tennessee, in which they fell behind by 65 points at halftime. And they're also coming off 2 weeks removed from a loss to an FCS opponent. We will learn more about Kent State and kind of the situation they find themselves in making this trip up. This will be their third power conference foe in a 4-week span. We'll catch up with a Golden Flashes beat reporter to learn a little bit more about that squad. But we begin this episode with recruiting updates from Tyler Calvaruso, our recruiting insider at 24/7 Sports here. Happy to be with you once again, my friend.
Happy to be back, man. It's another game week coming up. This one's a little bit different than others, but still plenty to talk about on the recruiting front as always.
Yeah, if folks are still kind of picking up on our in-game week flow for the podcast, you can really expect to see Tyler on the Wednesday episodes here. We're going to get a midweek recruiting update, especially when there's a home game on the horizon with visitors, and there are home games the next few Saturdays. And we'll also use these Wednesday episodes to spotlight the opposing team, break down the opponent. Fortunately, moving forward, we get to tap into a lot of our 24/7 sports network with these Big Ten matchups, but we actually reached out to the Kent Stater this time, a student newspaper at Kent State. We'll get to that in a little bit. But Tyler, let's begin with the recruiting ramifications of a home game. And as we say every single time, there is something to pay attention to beyond the field whenever they get back into Beaver Stadium. There's 7 opportunities. Maybe you get an 8th this year if you can host a playoff game, to pack these guys as much as you can in the fall. Let's preface this by saying this is not the most desirable game nationally for people to tune into, and it's not the most desirable game locally for prospects to prioritize when this is one of 4 consecutive home matchups. So I guess we should lead off with that fact.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it just kind of is what it is, right? If you look at Penn State's schedule, this is far from the juiciest matchup. Those are coming. Illinois, UCLA, and then in November you got Ohio State in the whiteout against Washington. So those are the games recruits want to go to. So that's, this makes this weekend not the busiest visitors list or one that's loaded with top talent and top targets on the board. But that doesn't mean nothing's going on in State College. The recruiting staff working hard to put together a solid group of visitors that's going to include some guys who are on Penn State's radar. So moving forward, really starting next weekend with the Illinois game, we're going to get back to that trend of seeing top targets return to Happy Valley. It was, some scattered about this weekend, but nothing crazy.
Well, let's go through some of those names that are expected to be on campus through some confirmations, and take it where you want. Who are the names that we need to know?
Yeah, might as well start in the state. Barnes, from Bishop McDevitt in Harrisburg, linebacker who has had an offer from the Nittany Lions for really a while now. And Penn State's been keeping an eye on him since he was an underclassman. Always interested to see where things are going to go with a linebacker prospect, and you had that defensive coordinator change. Manny Diaz played such a big part in linebacker recruiting during his tenure at Penn State. Tom Allen kind of picked up where Diaz left off in that regard, and Barnes has remained on that radar. Allen made it out to see him at McDevitt during the spring contact period. He's been back to campus, and he's looking forward to getting back to town for this upcoming visit, get a look at that Penn State defense And, that linebacker board is still sorting itself out. That's a position, Penn State has made waves in 26. That's a position they've yet to strike at, but Barnes is a guy to keep an eye on moving forward. A couple other in-state guys, Charles Belzer from Imhotep is one we've discussed a bunch. But when it comes to this weekend, Barnes will be making it to campus. CJ Jeter, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that last name, from Virginia, is one of Penn State's newest cornerback targets in the 26 class. Staff had been monitoring him for a little bit. He's off to a solid start as a junior, and his recruitment really leading into last Friday, it had a very dominant ACC presence. There were a lot of ACC offers on his plate. That's starting to expand a little bit. Penn State jumping in with an offer. There's some other Big Ten programs sniffing around. Some Big 12 programs are starting to get involved. So solid prospect. The measurables are where they need to be for a Power 4 cornerback prospect. You check out the early season film, it tracks. He comes across as a player Terry Smith would like. as part of his cornerback room. So we'll see where things go. He's going to be in town this weekend. Beyond that, we're still sorting.
Yeah, just to clear this up. By the way, I think it's pronounced Jeter, like the former baseball
That's
player.
what I was thinking.
But he got his offer like 4 or 5 days ago, correct? Was this a visit all that was already on the horizon, or is this a visit that immediately came out of the offer?
The way he worded it to me was that was discussed once. He had the conversation with Alice Midas about being offered and then getting to campus. So I think things came together in that manner. But yeah, this offer actually came really hours before he took the field on Friday night against a name Penn State fans are pretty familiar with here, and Connor Salmon, the top 24/7 wide receiver target. He covered him throughout the night, and he did a pretty good job. It was a low-scoring game. Cheer actually played a big part in that being a low-scoring game because he was good in coverage against Salmon. I think performances are like that are why Penn State and other programs are starting to sniff around. You're starting to see the traits in coverage that make him a bona fide Power 4 prospect. But, yeah, this one, based on my conversation with him that we have up online, is 24/7. Got the feeling he was definitely interested in making it out to Penn State. But once that offer fell into place, this one came together in short order when it comes to the visit.
He's the number 39 cornerback nationally at 24/7 Sports in the 2026 rankings, as you said, out of Stonebridge in Virginia. I just wanted to circle back to Maurice Barnes real quick, who doesn't yet have a rating or ranking from 24/7 Sports, but definitely has the offer sheet that reflects his progress on the field. Boston College, Colorado, Duke, Maryland, Michigan, Notre Dame, Penn State, Rutgers, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, West Virginia are among the schools that offered Barnes. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the latest in a kind of a long line of visits. I think he was up for a spring practice. He was up for the blue-white game in Beaver Stadium. I believe he was up for at least a camp in late July, perhaps also Lash Bash. There's so many names to keep track of, but it seems like where you've got Jeter, popping up on the radar in the last week, suddenly getting to campus. With Barnes, the offer's been on the table for a while. The stepping stones have been in place, and he's taken a few of them forward with the Nittany Lions, and here's another one for him to take.
You pieced that timeline together pretty good. So he visited twice in the spring. If I'm remembering correctly, it was consecutive weekends. So he visited the weekend before the blue-white game, then he was back for the blue-white game. Then again, anytime you see stuff like that, it speaks to a prospect's level of interest. So yeah, then he comes back for Lash Bash. He participated in that first whiteout camp, and he was solid. Penn State, they're keeping an eye on him. They're waiting to see more of his junior year film, as they are with really all the guys on their board at this point. But yeah, Barnes has been around, and through that, a ton of familiarity has been built up with the staff. One thing that stands out regarding Barnes and his relationship with the Penn State staff is he just really feels that the culture that James Franklin has in State College, he feels it's a fit from what he's experienced at McDevitt, and that's something that he would really like to be part of if things fall into place that way.
And, of course, Penn State, you look at the headliners of their 2026 class right now, and it's a class that ranks third nationally in 24/7 Sports rankings. They're out of the Harrisburg area. You got Kevin Brown, offensive tackle, and Messiah Mickens, a running back, both from Harrisburg High School, and then Bishop McDevitt there is where you'll find Maurice Barnes. Any other names on the radar as we're still a few days away from kickoff? I want to encourage folks. We'll have Tyler on Wednesdays breaking down these lists, but confirmations tend to come Wednesday evening, Thursday, Friday too. So there'll be a lot more to track over at Lions247.com in the coming days.
Yeah, I mean, even some cases Saturday morning, some guys decide they want to make the trip. But Davion Brown is a possibility for this weekend based on what I've been hearing. He's working on. There are 2 dates that work for Brown, who's a top 100 receiver, a name who has been on the top of Marcus Hagan's board really since the start. And those two have a really good relationship. I actually think Penn State's in a pretty good spot there early on. Getting him back to campus has been a priority. It's either going to be this weekend or it's going to be the UCLA game on October 5th. Those are the 2 dates that work with Brown. So we'll see if he winds up making this trip this weekend. You got a couple of running back commits coming back this weekend as well. Local guys. Messiah Mickens is going to be in town. Tyke Hayes is going to be in town. Tyke Hayes, interested to see if he's going to suit up on Friday night. He missed this past week with an injury, but based on the quotes from Al Quippa's head coach, that just seems like a maintenance thing. Al Quippa's every year. They've got their designs on a deep run, and that means Tyke Hayes being healthy at a part of the schedule where you could afford to get him healthy. So interested to see if he'll be back on the field Friday night. If he is, you could always count on some electric numbers from him. But yeah, those 2 running back commits are planning on being back in town as well.
A couple of running backs, get a chance to watch a team that just featured multiple 100-yard rushers in their last game in Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. And just going back to Brown, 6'3", 185-pound receiver out of Trinity Episcopal School in Richmond, Virginia. Number 10 wide receiver nationally, number 64 overall recruit in the 2026 class. He's the number 2 player in the state of Virginia. Again, we'll continue to keep tabs on the Kent State visitors list as that comes together over at Lions247.com. But let's get over to a couple new offers that have come out in the state of Pennsylvania, and one that certainly, grabbed my attention immediately on Tuesday. And I know Brian Doan dropped a note on our board at Lions247 about it, was an offer to, you've heard this one before, that Penn State's pursuing a Duke linebacker commit. And let's not forget, it wasn't so long ago that Cameron Smith fit that description as a Duke linebacker commit. And the top 24/7 prospect has since joined Penn State's recruiting class. So what do we need to know about the latest target and the latest potential entanglement between James Franklin and his old buddy, Manny Diaz?
Kind of like Smith, just another name that Penn State fans would be plenty familiar with from our conversations here. Bradley Gompers, who has really blown up at the start of his senior season. His film has been top-notch. He's up to a 4-star prospect here at 24/7. And, Gompers has been an interesting evaluation in the sense that he's always tested really well. And he tested well at Penn State when he was back on campus last time. And I believe that was in June. And the staff, they've known him for a while. The relationships are there. But he missed a lot of his junior year due to injury. And that kind of hindered his evaluation process, not just from the Penn State perspective, but programs across the nation. There just wasn't a ton to go off besides those testing numbers. And also, Penn State did not host Central Catholic for 7-on-7 this summer, as it usually does. Central Catholic did not make it out. So that was a kind of another quote-unquote missed evaluation opportunity for the staff with Gompers back at full health. But his tape kind of speaks for itself at this point. You're seeing the offers flowing in, and he has the tools to play at Penn State. There are questions about, what position maybe at the next level, because, the length at linebacker, could he be an edge rusher? Could he even be a tight end? He has positional versatility, but Penn State is going to be involved in this recruitment now that, the offer is out there. That kind of goes without saying. This one's been kind of unfolding behind the scenes for a little bit now. Penn State's been in increased contact since the start of that senior season. And now that you've got the offer out there, you don't want to look at it and say, oh, well, now that Penn State has their offer, Gompers is going to make a move. He's still sorting through everything, still committed to Duke. And I think that in the coming weeks and months, he's going to be sorting through his options. Maybe that'll include some visits. Maybe it won't. We're going to have to see where things go. But Penn State made its intention pretty clear on Tuesday. They want to bring Gompers home. They want to keep him home. They want to bring him to State College.
Now, Penn State, when you look at Pennsylvania rankings for the 2025 class, I know this has been kind of a hot button topic during the course of this cycle. They've got the number 5 guy in Cameron Smith out of St. Joe's Prep in Philadelphia, who we just discussed. He spent significant time committed to the Duke Blue Devils before he joined this class. Deshaun Burnett is number 8 in those Pennsylvania rankings out of Pittsburgh. He's a guy that we could see being an edge rusher, being a linebacker at the next level, but Mother Nature may be dictating that he's going to be on the front. And then Brady O'Hara is number 10 on that list. You talk about a guy who's undergoing a transition position-wise, playing tight end at the high school level for North Catholic in Pittsburgh. And by the way, Central Catholic in Pittsburgh is where you'll find Bradley Gompers. So they would love to add to that list, and they'd love to add more names there. Alex Taish is another linebacker who's in state number 12. But when it comes to Gompers, who's number 9 in the state of Pennsylvania, he's a guy that's a 4-star in 24/7 sports assessment, number 32 at the linebacker spot. But as you said, he seems like he could be a versatile kind of prospect. What's your gut telling you if Penn State is pushing, and it seems like that's what they plan to do in putting out this offer? What's your gut tell you about what comes next in the process?
I think, assuming Penn State pushes at the level we anticipate, and we've always touched on when an offer goes out this late in the cycle, you take notice, especially when it's to a guy committed elsewhere. Your intentions are made pretty clear at that point. I think this is one that definitely needs to be kept a pretty close eye on, because the fact of the matter is Penn State's they're going to do what they can to get Gompers away from that Duke commitment. And Central Catholic is a program that Penn State is always going to want to recruit. Terry Smith has made that clear when discussing the program. That's a place where we're going to be active and we need to recruit, because, that they have good relationships with that staff there. Those guys, they get to State College, they're ready to roll. They know what's expected of them, and just it's a good place for Penn State to be. So I think you combine all of that, and then you look at who Gompers is as a prospect and his ceiling and where he could potentially wind up in his career one day. All of that, I think, has not only Penn State very intrigued and very interested in getting Gompers on board. But I think Gompers are going to be pretty interested in Penn State as well. He's got Xavier Thomas, one of his Central Catholic teammates in the secondary. He's committed. Peter Gonzalez, Anthony Specca, already in State College. So anytime you have that familiarity already in place, that is only going to help Penn State's chances.
Central Catholic, you mentioned it. It's been good to Penn State recently. Peter Gonzalez, wide receiver, Anthony Specca, linebacker, both members of the 2024 Penn State freshman class. Unfortunately, Gonzalez suffered an injury during preseason. He'll be sidelined for a bit. Anthony Specca, though, is a guy that we've heard really strong reviews about what he's done behind the scenes at the linebacker spot on special teams. And what we heard about both those guys, to kind of reference this, is that they showed up mentally and physically prepared for what a power conference life was going to be like here on a Penn State campus. So you got a guy in Gompers who played alongside with them, has gone through the same program, and maybe you like the match there too. Tyler, let's segue over to Cameron Smith, because you had a story up. I just mentioned him multiple times. He is, when we went into flip season, he was the guy who got things started for them, jumping over from Duke as a top 24/7 talent. You got some intel on him during a recent trip to the sidelines for high school football action. Tell us what you continue to learn about Cameron Smith, who's a New Jersey native, made that move over to St. Joe's Prep, the Philadelphia powerhouse, and will eventually join the Nittany Lions.
Well, Penn State has been pleased with Smith's development. I can tell you the St. Joe's Prep staff has certainly been pleased with what Smith has brought to the program since he transferred in. I remember when Smith first made the jump. This is before he was even committed to Penn State or committed anywhere. You always wonder how a guy is going to react in the difference in competition, because he's playing at Salem High down in South Jersey. That's one of the most rural places in the state, and Salem's playing in one of the state's smallest classifications. They were either Group 2 or Group 1 at that point. I don't know what their classification is now, but the fact of the matter is Smith wasn't playing against, big dogs on a weekly basis. That changed the second that he got to St. Joe's Prep. And that changed even before he played a single game at St. Joe's Prep, just the competition he was going up against in practice on a daily basis. And any questions that may have been had about Smith's ability to translate at that level were answered in pretty short order, pretty quickly. He showed the St. Joe's Prep staff that he is going to be a big-time part of that defense the second he arrived on campus ahead of his junior season, and that's carrying over into his senior season. I mean, he led St. Joe's Prep in tackles as a junior. That's playing alongside Anthony Sacca, the Notre Dame commit at linebacker, Max Roy in the trenches on the defensive line, Alex Haskell on the defensive line, who's 2026 target for Penn State, Emilio Agard, who is a true freshman cornerback at Wisconsin now. So there was a lot of top talent on that Prep defense, and Smith was one of the leaders right off the bat. When I saw Smith at Don Bosco, when St. Joe's Prep played Don Bosco in North Jersey last year, one of the things I wanted to see was how comfortable he would be in that St. Joe's Prep defense. And, he was ready to go. He was flying around the field making plays. When he suited up against Erasmus Hall, and, Penn State wide receiver commit Lyric Samuel, the game I was at recently, again, flying around, making plays. He was actually voted a captain for that game based on his performance against St. Edward from Ohio the previous week, making plays on special teams. You talk to people at St. Joe's Prep, they cannot have more good things to say about Cam Smith. The staff just raves about him. And they think that when he gets to Penn State, he's going to be ready to go solely just based on the way he prepares. His intellect as a linebacker. He's ready to go on a weekly basis. So everyone at St. Joe's Prep is excited about him, where he's heading in his career. Penn State has obviously been expressing a similar sentiment by how hard they pushed to flip him. And this one's coming together nicely as a really solid get for the Nittany Lions.
Let's talk about other Penn State commits, because we've now got some high school games logged across America. Guys have created some buzz. We're not going to get to all of them right here, but when we talk about players who are pledged to Penn State, who were some of the names that continue to stand out for you?
Coming off this past week, you saw a lot of strong performances from guys who are committed. Kamon Spell in the 27 class has been balling out for McKeesport. Man, McKeesport's schedule has been ridiculous to start the year. They just broke through with their first win. Spell ran for 3 touchdowns against Bell Vernon, so he's doing his thing. He's staking his claim to being an elite prospect in that 27 class. We've got him ranked in the 50s over here at 24/7, and I think he's a guy who can only climb moving forward. Matt Henderson had 9 catches for more than 90 yards in a Powhatan loss. He's looking good working at tight end for the first full-time tight end for the first time here as a senior. And, Drew Wallace-Coleman, he rushed for 70 yards in a loss to East St. Louis out of Illinois. He's been really, really good for Imhotep throughout the year. He's up over 400. He's close to 500 rushing yards through 4 games. So I think that tells you all you need to know about the way he's performing. Cortez Harris, he helped Riverdale Baptist to a huge win over Good Counsel over the weekend. He had a sack in that game, was disruptive, bringing quarterback pressure all night long. So kudos to him. Riverdale Baptist is now one of the top 5 programs in Maryland coming off that win. Really consensus, no matter what rankings you look at. They're having a very good season. Harris playing a huge part in that. Another commit who you might not be able to quantify his stats, like his impact like the other guys, Mike Troutman in Jersey at DePaul. DePaul also took down Good Counsel earlier this year. They're off to a hot start. Just played a game in which Boston College running back commit Nolan James rushed for 3 touchdowns. Troutman has played a huge part in paving the way for James' success out of the backfield. He's been a force in the trenches for DePaul. He's going to be going up against fellow offensive line commit Malachi Goodman here at Paramus Catholic pretty soon. That's going to be an intriguing matchup to follow. Really, regarding most of the commits have been having great senior seasons. They've been the 25 class. Kobe Howard caught a touchdown this past weekend. So you're liking what you see out of a lot of these guys.
Yeah, and there is one thing we haven't discussed much, and I don't want to get into it deep, but Beckham Kritza has had issues taking that quarterback job at Miami Central. I know it was his to start, but they've been playing games now for 3 or 4 weeks down there, and he's kind of taken a step backward. Can you just give us a quick summary of what the senior season has looked like for Kritza? It's probably a story that we'll discuss later on this season in the podcast with some more depth, but haven't been able to get that long look at him that we anticipated at one of the national powerhouse programs.
Yeah, so he started out the season as Miami Central starter. They dropped a matchup to Lakeland in which the offense was not operating at quite the level Miami Central staff was looking for. They turned to Anthony McQueen the following week, a transfer in from Booker T. Washington. He provides a little bit more of a running threat. And ever since he kind of took the reins under center, that offense has really opened up and operated at peak efficiency. That has relegated Kritza to a backup role. He's appeared in mop-up duty. He did so again this past weekend in a blowout win over Edison High. So it's not what you would expect, given the strides we thought Kritza made during the offseason. And you got to keep in mind, too, he's always been a long-term evaluation. When you talk to people at Penn State about Kritza and his upside, it's all about tools, arm talent, development, and then, just working with the staff and getting to where he needs to be. Danny O'Brien really likes him. He's liked him for a while. It's a big reason why he was on board in the first place. So this is something Penn State's just going to continue to monitor moving forward. As the fall progresses, it's something they're going to be keeping an eye on for sure. And, maybe that leads to some other movement at the quarterback position in terms of, reaching out to guys maybe from the past. We'll see what comes about on that front. But it's something we've discussed on the Lions 24/7 board, and it'll remain a topic of conversation.
The remarkable thing is if things kind of sustain the way they have been, then the most productive and the most snaps that we've seen from Kritza is going back to his freshman year of high school at Fairview and Boulder. We ended up back at Fairview last year after starting the season down in Miami. Was able to put together some solid performances, make a little bit of a playoff run. But, that's what he needs. I talked to, coaches on the Elite 11 staff after they got a look at him. And whether it was on the record, off the record, the thing I kept hearing stressed was he needs reps. He needs work. That's what he's going to need. And to not get that work before you show up to a college campus, where if you want to get in the game on a college campus, it's a whole different ball game. Just not an ideal scenario playing out for Kritza down in Miami Central. But we'll keep tabs on that. It remains relatively early in the season. They've got a ton of big matchups to go. So we'll see if that narrative can change. Let's finish with on the recruiting trail for football with a note on the Penn State legacy. You had a story up on Tuesday, Tyler, about someone whose father once played for the Nittany Lions, and now he's impressing, and now the Nittany Lions might like to take a longer look at him.
Yeah, Samson Gash, who has been really making waves early in his junior season out in Michigan playing for Catholic Central. When he camped at Penn State in June, he was really impressive. He was. He caught the staff's eye, and he tested well, which always helps in a situation like this. But the message has always been consistent. Hey, look, we're going to keep an eye on you. We're going to want to see more tape. We're going to want to see where things go in your development. And so far, he's put out the tape that has piqued more interest from Penn State and other programs. Toledo offered just last night. I think that pretty soon, just gut feeling, there's going to be a Power 4 offer on his plate whether it be Penn State or another program. He's doing good things, not just in terms of route running and pass catching with his hand in his route tree, but he's doing it against solid cornerbacks. He just went up against a top 24/7 corner. So he's playing against quality competition and he's producing. That's always what you want to see out of a guy you're monitoring at any position, especially at wide receiver, though. He's generating separation against high-level guys. That's important because that's what you're going to have to do if you want to play power conference football. But he's looking at getting back to campus for a visit at some point this fall. He's not really all that focused on his recruitment. More of his focus is on the field right now. But he wants to visit Penn State again this fall. He's working on locking in a visit for that. And Penn State offer would be huge for his recruitment. His dad played for the Nittany Lions. He loves the program, likes Hagens, Mark Dupuy, likes the staff. So if Penn State were to offer, it'd be a game changer in his process. I can tell you that.
I don't think our older listeners, and I mean older as in like maybe 30 and older, are having trouble identifying who his dad is, but some of the younger ones might. His father, Sam Gash, was a fullback. It's a position that used to exist across all of football for those who aren't familiar with it. But he had a long run in the NFL too at the fullback position, also coached in the NFL after his career ended. His son, Samson, a rising figure to know. And we'll see if the Nittany Lions get more involved there. Let's finish with a note on basketball recruiting because we're just a few hours away from finding out if they're going to pick up a 4-star commitment. If you're listening to this on Wednesday afternoon, there's a 5:10 p.m. Eastern time announcement coming to 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Tell us the details on what people can expect to see in that announcement and ultimately what's at stake for the Nittany Lions basketball squad.
Mason Blackwood, 4-star wing, almost a top 100 prospect. He's just on the cusp of that top 100 status. We have him at 102 nationally here, 24/7. Coming down to Penn State and Rutgers for him. He was just in State College here earlier this month for his official visit. All the feedback from that visit has been pretty overwhelmingly positive. Visited Rutgers for an official in June. I think the recent intel has really pointed in Penn State's direction. And look, if you're into Nittany Lions hoops, checking out that commitment announcement we're on this evening might not be a bad idea. And it would be a good get for Penn State, no doubt about it, especially in a class that is looking like it's going to be smaller in numbers. There has been, I would say, a selective approach in this 2025 cycle, really zoning in on top guys and not expanding a whole lot beyond that. It has not been an expansive board for Penn State in this class. You saw that with them taking Justin Hauser, the in-state big, early in the cycle and really not pursuing any other bigs from that point on. So Blackwood, if he does join the class, it sounds like he'd be the guy at his position on the wing. And I think that has definitely carried some appeal.
Out of the New Hampton School in New Hampshire, again, number 102 overall, like Tyler referenced, a guy that would be a big addition for Penn State, and it's down to them and the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. A bit of a Big Ten battle here brewing. 5:10 p.m. Eastern on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to this after that already happened, go over to Lions247.com. And if it did go down and Penn State got the win, we have plenty of coverage waiting for you at Lions247.com. Tyler, appreciate the perspective you always lend us here on the podcast. I hope folks are checking out your work at Lions247.com.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it as always.
This episode of the Lions 24/7 podcast continues now with focus on the Nittany Lions' third opponent of this 2024 season. It is the end of the out-of-conference schedule for Penn State. Of course, they put on a nice show week one, despite the lightning delay and taking care of business at West Virginia, a game that many thought was going to cause them some issues. Then they experienced some issues against Bowling Green as a 5-touchdown favorite. Came out of that one with a 34-27 victory. Now the number 10 Penn State Nittany Lions return to Beaver Stadium. It's the second of 4 consecutive home games on the schedule. And this one, if it's close, it's going to shock a lot of people. I know they were surprised by Bowling Green, but just going through what Kent State has dealt with so far on the season, 0-3, they're 1-14 going back to the 2023 season under their current coaching regime. They came off of a 71-0 defeat at Tennessee, in which they trailed 56-0 at halftime, surrendered almost 40 points in the first quarter. Is a Kent State team that has had its moments, gone to some bowls in the MAC. This is not right now one of those squads, it appears. And we're going to get more information on this team that's coming to Happy Valley, their second straight power conference opponent on the road, from Dimitri Manousis. He works with the Kent Stater and KentWired.com. We appreciate you hopping on with us. And as I just laid out, been a challenging fall early thus far for Kent State. They're actually ranked 134th out of 134 FBS teams in the ESPN FPI. But with that, I welcome you on board to tell us exactly what it has looked like from your vantage point here through an 0-3 start.
Well, first, thanks for having me. I appreciate the offer and reaching out. But second, yeah, it's been rough to watch. So week one, they went to Pitt, and that's not a game they were expected to win. They were a 24-point underdog, I believe, and they went down 28-7. They fought back, and it was 28-21 in the third quarter. But then Pitt kind of blew it wide open, and they won 55-24. But a lot of people around the program and a lot of the people that pay attention to this team thought that they would be better after seeing that performance at Pitt. They thought they'd be a lot better than last year. And then week two, they played St. Francis, an FCS school, and they went down 17-0 and weren't able to fully recover, and they ended up losing that one 23-17. And then last week, of course, as you mentioned, the beatdown at Tennessee, 71-0. They can't really get any traction on offense, and defensively, they've given up over 400 yards in every game. They gave up, I believe it was 567 against Pitt, 402 against St. Francis, and I think it was 740 against Tennessee. So it's problems everywhere, as you would expect just by looking at the scores. But there's a lot that needs to be fixed.
Dimitri, the last couple of weeks, very different losses. You mentioned falling behind early at home against an FCS opponent. St. Francis is here in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure how many Penn State fans can actually tell you where that campus is located. But when it comes to that matchup and losing that game, I just want to reference the other two games for St. Francis this year. They lost 18-10 against Dayton, and they lost 27-20 against Central Connecticut. Their only win is against Kent State. What would you say stung more? Losing at home to an FCS team like that, or getting annihilated by Tennessee on the road last Saturday?
You could pick at either one. You could pick different reasons from each one, but I would say the St. Francis game, because that's a game you're supposed to win. That's a game that you paid them hundreds of thousands of dollars to come play. Right? It would have been like if you guys had lost to Bowling Green, right? That's not a game you're supposed to lose, and it's at home. And it was consistent struggles throughout that game. When you play Tennessee, you're not expecting to win that game. They were 49-point underdogs. Now, I don't think anyone really expected it to be that bad. Tennessee covered the spread in the first 23 minutes of the game, but I would say the St. Francis game, just because that's when I would say people really realize that there might be some major issues with the football team. You lose to Pitt, again, not expected to win that one. So you lose to St. Francis, that's a game you're supposed to win, and they didn't, and it was at home. And then you talk about St. Francis losing there are only two other games to other FCS schools. Their only win is against Kent State. That's an issue.
What does that mean for the head coach, Kenny Burns? He's only 40 years old. It's his first head coaching job. We got to see him around the Big Ten a bit when he was a longtime Minnesota assistant before he made the move. I previously played running back at Indiana in this conference. And so when you're 1-14, and again, this team's only, I think, 3 years removed from playing in the MAC championship game. What is are there dark clouds over him right now, or is this still kind of a rebuild, give him some time mode? I just have to imagine the last couple of results have maybe impacted patience down at Kent State.
A little bit, but it's not a football sport. Right? It's not Penn State. So if you guys had this start, they'd be calling for James Franklin's head, right? But so there's a little more leeway because of that. But he was given a tough situation. The old coach Sean Lewis, he went to be the OC at Colorado. And a lot of guys transferred out, and so Kenny Burns came into a tough situation, and he did what he could. 1-11 last year, and this year, 0-3, right? But I think it's starting to get a little bit. His seat's starting to warm up just a little bit. If they happen to go 0-12 maybe this year, 1-11, I certainly wouldn't be shocked if the athletic department cut him loose, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he stayed. Now, if he stayed another year, if they didn't fire him, I would expect him to be on a fairly short leash next year.
What are you picking up, whether it's conversations with people around the program, coverage this week at Kent State? How is this team mentally going to rebound after what it experienced down in Knoxville the week before against an FCS foe? Then coming up to Happy Valley, encountering what we'd imagine will be 100,000 plus fans on Saturday afternoon, and obviously a talent gap in place. Does the mindset seem to be there, or are you a little worried for Kent State that they may just be ripe for the picking again?
You know, it's a team that you mentioned was at the bottom of the CBS Sports 134 ranked team. So even if they have the mindset, you can only expect so much. But with that, Kenny Burns has talked about each week. We have a new each week is a new 60 minutes, and so he seems like he's got a good mindset going into it. But he says each week is a new 60 minutes. And we're there to win a football game. Even after losing to Pitt in Tennessee, in the press conference, he would say losing is unacceptable. This was unacceptable. Obviously, you would expect him to say that after the St. Francis game. But even when being big underdogs, he still says losing is unacceptable. So it at least sounds like to us, the reporters, that he expects to go in there and win, or at least compete. Now, as far as the players, I'm not sure. He's talked a lot about them coming out flat. They came out flat against Pittsburgh, but then fought back. They came out flat against St. Francis and fought back, but just didn't have enough in them to come back from down 17-0. And then against Tennessee, they were just they're, like you said, major talent gap. But Kenny Burns, at least, Kenny Burns has seemed confident in that they will be in the right mindset going into each game.
Let's talk about the quarterback position, because if a team's going to come up here to Penn State after that and kind of right the ship, I'd imagine it's going to start with quarterback play and having that guidance on offense in an adverse environment. And so Devin Cargman, 6'3", 220-pound junior. I know he's spent a few seasons on the field for Kent State going back to 2022. When I look at the offensive work so far, through 3 games, no 100-yard rusher for Kent State. Cargman only has 2 interceptions. I think you see kind of the scores and the results. You wonder if maybe it's been a turnover-prone situation at quarterback. What are they getting from that position? And if they are to make any more noise than they have in recent weeks, what does he need to bring to the field? What does he need to accomplish?
Oh, it's tough for him because he's been playing with 2 of his 3 opponents have been Power 4 teams, right? And so it's going to be tough when you're going on the road playing Pitt or playing Tennessee. But some of his throws have been inaccurate. Watching the St. Francis game, some of his throws have been inaccurate. Some of them have been dirt balls. But his line hasn't necessarily held up the way he would always want it to. They've been okay. But they've got to be better. But he's like you said, he hasn't thrown many picks, but he's just got to be a little more efficient and quick and decisive, I would say, especially going to Penn State. Your defense is gonna eat him alive if he's not quick and decisive. Last week he was 9 of 15, I think, no picks, which actually isn't a bad thing, or is actually something to hang your hat on when you go to Neyland. But 9 of 15, I don't even know if he hit 100 yards, but he's just got to be quick and decisive this week.
Yeah, he was at 58 yards against Tennessee last Saturday, and he's the Camden, New Jersey native, so he's coming somewhat close to home, about as close to home as his schedule will allow. When we look across the field for Kent State, in a game like this, they're going to need playmakers to make plays. So offensively, defensively, give us a few names of guys who could swing momentum at different points of the contest.
So I'm looking at Luke Floria. He's a receiver, kick returner as well. Sometimes they'll put him in the backfield. He leads the team in receptions with 15. I think he's got 206 receiving yards. I know it's just over 200. And Krishawn McCray, I believe he was preseason All-MAC. He's the second leading receiver. He has 12 receptions for somewhere around 150, 160 yards maybe. So look for those guys. If Penn State shuts down those guys, Kent State's offense probably isn't going to go anywhere. The running game just has not been there. They average, I think, just 1.7 yards per carry as a team, I believe. And Kai Thomas he's their leading rusher. He's only averaging 2.5 a pop, 89 yards on the season on 36 carries. So they're going to it's going to have to be everybody. And that's always how it is when a MAC school is going to go play Penn State or, top 10 team. Defensively, it's Caleb Johns and Rocco Nickel leading the way with tackles. Rocco Nickel, I think, has 24, and Caleb Johns has 20. They only have one interception on the season, though, as a whole defense. So they're going to need some of those, right? Drew Auer threw a pick against Bowling Green in the red zone. They're going to need plays like that. Long drives for Penn State, but if you can turn them away in the red zone and also that runs clock, you need plays like that and momentum swings like that.
Well, the Golden Flashes were outgained 740 to 112 yards last Saturday. They are now the biggest underdog in the James Franklin era, almost a 50-point spread right now. So let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you for your prediction next, but taking a win off the table, because I don't think you're going to predict a Kent State win, what would be considered a success for this program following 60 minutes of football here in Happy Valley?
If they could walk out of there keeping Penn State low 40s, 45 max, and if Kent State could slip up to 20, maybe. I know that's a lot to ask coming from a team that just lost 71-0, but I think 45 to 20. If you walk away with that, you say, okay, we went into Happy Valley as huge underdogs, and it wasn't awful. We scored 20 points and we kept them to 45, which is an improvement over last week. Though I think most agree Tennessee probably has a better offense than Penn State. But if you score 20 points on that Penn State defense after scoring 0 against Tennessee, that's not bad at all either.
So there's the scenario where things play out a little bit better for Kent State. I want to ask you now for your realistic outlook for the game. When you kind of envision how it plays out Saturday, what do you expect, and what do you see the final score as?
Well, let me ask you this. At what point does James Franklin put in his backups?
As soon as possible after what happened against Bowling Green, because they didn't get to put any of them in.
Right. Okay. Well, I think Kent State will grab 10, 13 points maybe. I think maybe we'll grab a first half field goal, first half touchdown maybe if they're lucky. Something odd happens. Penn State fumbles a kick return, and Kent State's set up in the red zone. I think Penn State might have a slow start. First drive or two, but after that, I think they'll just get rolling and kind of score at will in the first half. But I'm thinking maybe like a 59 to 13 type of deal.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the prediction, the perspective on Kent State, and I hope that your coverage gets a little bit more rewarding for that program as you get into MAC play beyond out of conference, because I know it's been a bit brutal beyond the conference schedule. But thank you, Dimitri Manousis. You can follow his coverage at the Kent Stater and KentWire.com. We really appreciate you for hopping on with us.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff from Dimitri. Before him, you heard from our resident recruiting insider, Tyler Calvaruso, breaking down the latest. We will have more information from the recruiting trail as we get closer to kickoff, get some more confirmations for those recruits who will be in Beaver Stadium on Saturday. And, of course, coming out of practice on Wednesday evening, go over to Lions247.com for our practice notebook, for our full photo gallery from all the action out there, and video footage from the defense, offense, and special teams work that we get a chance to witness. And additionally, we'll be back with our third episode of this week on Thursday. I'll be joined by Mark Brennan and Daniel Gallen, and we'll give you our lay of the land coming out of the bye week, the key storylines entering this matchup, players to watch, and ultimately our score predictions for this matchup. Will Penn State cover an astronomical spread? We'll let you know how we're feeling about it on the next episode of the Lions 24/7 podcast. For now, stepping aside, I am Tyler Donahue. Thanks as always for tuning in.